What's going on, everyone? Bran here from Bloody Breakdown, and it is, of course, at least in my opinion, the most wonderful time of the year. We're approaching spooky season. Hell, we're in spooky season, ladies and gents. Let's be honest, the entire month of October is just that. And being someone who runs a horror YouTube channel, I often do get asked, hey, Bran, are there any movies you would suggest for me to watch during the Halloween season? And the answer is yes. I have quite a few. Some of them I'm sure you've heard of. Some of them maybe you haven't. Some maybe you just haven't seen. You haven't gotten around to it yet. Either way, this is going to be my list. I'm going to do this video by video, decade by decade. So, for example, as you can tell, this video, we're going to be starting off with the 80s. And I'm going to go through year by year and give you my pick for the best horror film of each year within the decade of the 80s, and a couple of honorable mentions because it's really, really difficult to narrow every year down to just one. So yeah, let's go ahead. Let's jump right in and let's check out my personal favorite picks for the best horror movies of the 80s year by year. So of course, we're going to be starting with 1980. And before we get into the my pick for the overall best horror movie of the year 1980, let's go ahead and jump into some honorable mentions. Why don't we? Starting out as an honorable mention, I know some of you will probably be a little upset with this pick not being the horror movie of 1980. I know that I've garnered a lot of slasher fans on this channel, as I am probably most apt to go toward a slasher if you're talking horror. But 1980, we're going to talk some honorable mentions first. You can't talk about 1980 horror without mentioning the original Friday the 13th. It's a classic. I think most people have probably seen this, but anyone who hasn't, it's spooky season, folks. Get out there and enjoy and appreciate one of the best, campiest, corniest, bloodiest, just overall a good time as far as the horror genre is concerned, specifically horror slasher, rather. Definitely check this one out if you haven't. Fantastic film. I think we all know it spawned a litany of sequels, but if you've never seen the first one, I think it's a good a time as any to go back and check it out. Another honorable mention I have here is Maniac. And this is one that was remade, I believe, back in like 2012 or somewhere around in that vicinity. But this is the original from 1980. Very brutal, very graphic. Just, kind of a mind fuck in a lot of ways, honestly. I don't want to say too much about these films other than to give a vague general description or some things maybe I'd like to toss in about them. Because for the people that haven't seen them, the whole purpose of this video is really to give people inspiration for something to watch during the Halloween season. But if you haven't seen Maniac, I will say this, pretty brutal, pretty gory. Maybe if things on the airing on the side of a little too brutal aren't for you, maybe this one isn't for you. I definitely say this one isn't for everyone, especially considering, as you can probably tell here, that this guy has decapitated a woman on the poster, and he's got a big boner doing so. That's nothing to do with me looking for it at all. It just showed up. So yeah, check out Maniac, folks. It's a really, really good time if you're into the really brutal stuff as far as horror goes. So moving along here, ladies and gents, this is the third and final honorable mention for the year of 1980. I had to throw in John Carpenter's The Fog. Now, I mentioned the remake for Maniac just a few moments ago, and I did like that remake with Elijah Wood. This film actually got a remake in the early 2000s, which was pure piss garbage. Don't bother with that one. Check out the original Fog from 1980. Jamie Lee Curtis, John Carpenter directing. So that should tell you everything you need to know right there as far as an 80s horror film. Definitely check this one out. Really good. I suggest it. So let's move on to my pick for the best film in the horror genre for 1980. Ladies and gentlemen, The Shining. a film adaptation of a Stephen King novel directed by Stanley Kubrick. I know there are a lot of people that are all, pro Stephen King when it comes to this film, or pro Kubrick when it comes to this film. I don't care really where your allegiances lie. I think everyone really, at the end of the day, whether you appreciate how Kubrick took the novel and turned it into a film, the liberties that he did take with it, no matter how you feel, I think you have to admit at the end of the day, this is a damn good film. Not just a good horror film, it's just a good film in general. Kubrick was always painstaking work would go into his films, and it shows through. It's a movie that, like I said, I'm suggesting these to people who maybe haven't seen them. Even if you have seen The Shining, go back and watch it again. It's a movie where if you pay close enough attention, you'll notice new details every time that make the movie that much more enjoyable or that much more horrific. So yeah, definitely my pick. Best horror movie for 1980, The Shining. And once again, I want to reiterate, people, this is nothing more than my opinion, just going through year by year, checking out the horror that came out, and just kind of, sifting them around to where I feel, are the best. So that's 1980, ladies and gents. Let's go ahead and move right along here to 1981 to some honorable mentions. We'll start with The Burning. The Burning is one of my all-time favorite, slashers that isn't really a mainstream slasher. Like Cropsy here, the antagonist in this film, you wouldn't put him in that upper echelon with Michael or Freddy or Jason or what have you. But it's an amazing film. It's got some really cool practical effects in it. You'll see some stars before they were stars in this thing. I know Jason Alexander is in this film. There's Holly Hunter, I believe is her name. She's in this film. She'll actually come up on the 90s list in the next video that we're going to be making. But yeah, interesting story, interesting slasher, really good, cool kills, practical effects. It's just an overall really good time for an 80s slasher. And I know there's probably a couple of people out there that haven't seen this thing. So to them, I would say definitely 100% go check this thing out. Really interesting, really gory, but a fun movie. Another, and this killed me. This really killed me to put this in honorable mentions for 1981, but it is what it is. Ladies and gents, it's a fantastic movie nonetheless. I know most of you have probably seen this thing. If you haven't, what are you doing with your life? The Evil Dead, Bruce Campbell, the Raimis involved in this one, of course. Kind of where they all got their start, I guess, so to speak. Fantastic movie. The Cabin in the Woods before the Cabin in the Woods, quite literally. Just a really, and I know the Evil Dead movies kind of get this, comedy horror thing. This is really before there was a lot of comedy in this franchise. This one leans way more heavily on the horror. So if that's something you're seeking, maybe you're familiar with Ash versus Evil Dead or Army of Darkness or maybe Evil Dead 2. This one's a little bit more on the serious level, in the same vein as the reboot from years ago. So yeah, Evil Dead. It's amazing. Check it out. And another honorable mention before we jump into my pick for horror film of 1981, I got to bring up Friday the 13th Part 2, because I got to tell you, in many ways, this sequel does surpass its original. I know the original is a classic. It's, the first time you watch it, it's a whodunit. You really don't have that preconceived notion of a Jason as you do in this film, Part 2, going forward for the most part. But this one it just improved in so many different ways. I think the final girl is better in Jenny. I believe that, obviously Jason is a much bigger threat in these films than his mom was in the original. But yeah, it's an overall really good film. And I think in a lot of ways, like I said, it definitely does surpass the original. So up next, here it is, folks, 1981 movie of the year in the horror genre. I gotta give it to Halloween 2. And making these lists, I found that it was kind of rare for sequels to be my number one favorite horror film of each year. It does happen, don't get me wrong, but it seems to be a little bit more rare than I thought it was. So of course, this is the direct follow-up to John Carpenter's 1978 Halloween, taking place on the same night literally picking up right after the original ends. It's a fantastic movie. They definitely up the gore in this one to kind of keep up with where the slasher subgenre was at the time. So maybe there's a little bit lost in translation from Halloween 1 in 78 to Halloween 2 in 81. But nonetheless, it's a great time. Another brutal slasher flick, but definitely one of, if not the best sequel in the now 12 movie catalog that is the Halloween franchise. So yeah, for me, definitely the best horror film of 1981. No bones about it. So let's go ahead and move on to 1983, and let's talk about some honorable mentions. Of course, I got to talk about Basket Case, ladies and gents. This one, cheesy, corny, schlock. Not even going to lie to you. It is what it is. But it is fantastic in the best / worst way. So bad it's good. I kind of say guilty pleasure, but at the same time, I mean, is it really? Because this is exactly what it's meant to be. So I definitely enjoy it. It's one that I feel like a lot of people probably haven't seen, but definitely Basket Case is one to check out, especially if you're just looking for a crazy good time for a Halloween film. This is one that I would look into. Belial's a little bastard, and you're going to find that out. What a crazy movie. Definitely deserves an honorable mention. So coming up next is another Friday the 13th film. We're talking Friday the 13th Part 3 in 3D. I really feel like the first few Friday the 13th films are really the strongest ones in the entire franchise. Of course, there are some good ones later on down the road, but especially the first four are really good, really effective at what they're trying to do. And this is just a really good example of a Friday film if you've never seen one before. This is the first time we see Jason donning the infamous hockey mask. You really have like a feeling out process of like Jason kind of figuring out who he is and what he's about. And I think a lot of that comes to fruition in this movie. And it's just, it's it's almost like the prototypical Friday film in a lot of ways. And it's got a really good final girl. It's got a cool cast. I've always enjoyed it, and I thought it definitely deserved an honorable mention here for 1982. So we'll move on here to another honorable mention, and it's funny that Friday the 13th caught up to Halloween pretty quickly, did they not? 3 for both of them, the third entry in the year of 1982. Now, I know this movie has a lot of detractors. A lot of people don't like it because, I'll just go ahead and put it out here if you don't know, there is no Michael Myers in Halloween 3. It is the only Myers-less sequel in the entire franchise, and for a good reason. The fans really did want Michael Myers, but this movie has definitely found its place as a cult film in recent years. It is 100% without the antagonist of the series. However, this movie stands up very well on its own. It's got its own story that I think is quasi-tied to the original Michael story, especially if you look more into Halloween 2, the backstory behind that. But yeah, I absolutely adore this movie. I think that it definitely shouldn't get the hate that it does. And I would further to say that if you remove Halloween 3 from the title and just call this thing Season of the Witch, nobody would ever look at it as such a bastard of the horror genre. It's a fantastic film. I love it. Really wish I could give it the number 1 spot, but there's another movie that took that one for the year of 1982, and that, my friends, is John Carpenter, who, by the way, was the producer and I guess kind of writer of that last film, Halloween 3. We're talking about The Thing, ladies and gentlemen, without a doubt, without question, the best horror film of 1982. I absolutely love it. I adore it. It's in my top 10 of all-time favorite horror films. It is a remake, I guess somewhat of a remake of The Thing from Another World. John Carpenter really knocked it out of the park with this one. I mean, it's fantastic. The practical effects and the effects that they were able to achieve back in 1982 that still hold up to this day. It's a great film. It keeps you on the edge of your seat. You never know who has been infected or assimilated. And it's just a really, really good story. from beginning to end. I could not suggest this one more. And if you haven't seen this one yet, get on it immediately. Immediately. So let's move on. That's 1982. Let's go into 1983. Let's talk about a couple of honorable mentions. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. This was one of the years in my research for this video where I came across a year where I really felt like it was kind of lacking. I'm not going to lie to you. I really had to narrow down 1980 to 1980 and 1981 and 1982 a lot to get those honorable mentions and the movie of the year. 83 was a little bit easier for me. I noticed that there wasn't quite as much that year that I really thoroughly enjoy. So jumping into honorable mentions, this is Cujo, another Stephen King adaptation. If you're looking for a movie, now, granted, I do enjoy this film, but I got to say right off the bat, if the annoying little kid trope in horror films is just too much for you, this one isn't for you. Not that it's really the kid's fault. He's really in a horrible situation with his mom here in this film. But yes, that annoying child in a horror movie trope is definitely active in this one. If that's too much for you to deal with, I would suggest staying away from this one. But I'm pretty sure most of us know your big rabies-infected dog here, Saint Bernard, trying to get his jaw, so to speak, around the throats of a mother and her son. I think most of us know this story. Pretty compelling story. I always thought it was very interesting. So that's why I decided to put it as an honorable mention for 1983. And another honorable mention for 1983 before we go into the movie of the year for me, as far as the horror genre is considered, you got to give it to Sleepaway Camp. I said there's not a whole lot of movies I really enjoyed this year from 83. But I got to tell you, this definitely has to be one of them. It's kind of a paint by numbers slasher in a lot of ways. There's some definitely weird, creepy characters that I'm very glad to see oft in this one. But it's the ending more so than anything. This film, it's reliant heavily on its ending to leave an impression on you, and leave an impression it will. So yes, if you haven't seen Sleepaway Camp, get ready. Crazy ending, twist ending even, and go check it out. Sleepaway Camp from 1983. And that will bring us to the movie of the year, as far as I'm concerned, from the horror genre in 1983. We're talking about Psycho 2. And I said earlier, it's kind of rare for sequels to end up in this top spot. But Psycho 2 did pull that off. I think it was maybe an absence makes the heart grow fonder type thing. There had been 20 plus years since we had seen Norman Bates as a character portrayed by Anthony Perkins back here to make a proper Psycho sequel. There's some really interesting twists and turns in this one that play on the original. I don't want to say too much because I've noticed talking to people that there are a lot of people that have never seen a Psycho film after the original. There are 4 more films. There's a couple of TV shows. I think there's a made-for-TV movie as well from back around this era. So yeah, there's a big Psycho franchise that a lot of people don't really explore past that original Hitchcock film. And I would say definitely do so, and start with Psycho 2. Like I said, it adds on, builds onto the mythology of the original film. And it may have been a lacking year in 83, but don't sleep on Psycho 2. It's actually really, really entertaining and enjoyable. As we move into 1984, ladies and gents, another Friday film. And I know what you're thinking. This guy is just going to put every Friday film throughout the 80s on his list. And I assure you that is not the case. There are Friday films that won't even make honorable mentions as this one has. But it's 1984. The final chapter is one of my favorite in the franchise. I thought it was incredibly well done. I think a lot of times I kind of bounce back and forth between the final chapter and Jason Lives as my favorite Friday film. And it's really often difficult to decide which one I prefer more because I like them both for totally different reasons. But this is the original final chapter, the original goodbye, before they decided there's a lot more money to be made off of this franchise. But it's so well done. You got Corey Feldman. You've got just an incredible looking Jason in this film. it's a good time all the way around. I definitely feel like it should be an honorable mention. If this is one you've skipped in the Friday franchise, get on it. So another honorable mention here is yet another Stephen King adaptation. I'm talking about Children of the Corn. Never thought kids could be so creepy, to be perfectly honest with you. But yes, indeed, they can. Especially with the religious aspects that are tied into this film. For me, that makes it extra scary. I've always felt, the religious cult type things, for me at least, are extremely terrifying, considering these are things that actually do happen in some essence. So yeah, Stephen King's another Stephen King adaptation, Children of the Corn. It's a good movie, and it's extra creepy as far as I'm concerned. So it definitely belongs here on the honorable mentions for 84. And here it is, ladies and gents. In case you didn't know, this is it. This is the horror film of 1984. This one's going to Wes Craven's A Nightmare on Elm Street, the original Freddy Krueger flick. Once again, this is one that I'm sure most people have seen. If you haven't, definitely get on it. But even if you have, revisit it. I feel like, aside from maybe the ending, this movie is damn near flawless. Love it. Love the concept. Love the characters. The ending's a little iffy, and I know there's been some debate on that ending. I know even the people who worked on it weren't really fond of the ending, but I got to tell you, everything else that comes before it is chef's kiss, fantastic. It's Wes Craven. I mean, come on. At the end of the day, he was one of the masters of horror. Let's be perfectly honest with ourselves, and he created one of the master slashers in this genre, Freddy Krueger. So yeah, it's a fantastic film. I couldn't let this film go by the wayside. It's one of my favorites of all time. So it's definitely, in my opinion, the best of 1984. So let's move on to 1985 here with some honorable mentions. First, we've got to mention George A. Romero's Day of the Dead. I've always felt like Dawn and Night were stronger films, but I don't think that this one's a bad film by any metric whatsoever. Although I think there are others in this franchise that are better than it, I still think that this one damn sure holds its own. Being subterranean for the vast majority of the film kind of gives you that feeling of like creeping, like everything's closing in on you. And you've even got the character. Another thing I always liked about these Romero films is it's not just the zombies you have to worry about. It's also these people who are trying to take advantage of the situation that you also have to look into, that you also have to be wary of. So yeah, this one, it's part 3, if you're unaware, in the Of the Dead series, Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead. Here we have Day of the Dead. Fantastic movie. If you haven't seen it, check it out. It's got a really good remake, too, from 2004, if I'm not mistaken. But we'll get there, folks, in the 2000s video. So, yeah, George Romero's Day of the Dead, definitely worth an honorable mention for 85. Also, it's kind of hard to talk about that if you don't talk about the Return of the Living Dead, another sequel to Night of the Living Dead. For those of you who don't know, the writer and director, I guess there was a bit of a rights dispute, and both of them got to continue on franchises in 2 different directions, kind of a fork in the road here. And here we have the Living Dead sequel, The Return of the Living Dead. This one's a lot more funny, a lot more comedy based, a lot more tongue in cheek, I guess, than Romero went with his sequels after Night of the Living Dead. But this one, you've got Tom Matthews in it, who you'll recognize as Tommy Jarvis in Jason Lives. It's a good time at the end of the day. It really is. It's a good comedy horror film. If you're looking to have a little scare in your day and a laugh at the same time, I'd give this one a shot as well. So up next, ladies and gents, we are talking about my pick for horror film of 1985. This is an H.P. Lovecraft adaptation. We are talking about ReAnimator. Oh, man, I love the ReAnimator series. I love this movie. I love Bride of ReAnimator. It's just good stuff all the way around. That was another one, Beyond ReAnimator. Yeah, even that one, whereas maybe not as strong as the first two, very enjoyable film, but this one, definitely the best in my opinion. Um, and it's one of those things I don't want to say too much for people who have never seen this film because I actually feel like there are a lot of people who are going to kind of scroll by this channel, maybe not being the biggest horror fans, but looking for something for Halloween maybe to watch. So I think the less said about this one, the better. The people who know already know. The people who don't need to go find out. Check out ReAnimator, folks. In my opinion, best horror film of 1985. So let's go ahead and move on to 1986. And some people are already cursing me out, realizing this is an honorable mention. So I making the list for 1986, I kind of figured I was going to piss a lot of people off. I like The Fly. I really do. Don't get me wrong. I love Cronenberg's work. I think this is an amazing film. Maybe one of the best body horror films ever made. But unfortunately, I do have to put it on honorable mentions here because there is another movie that I like better than this one. And I'm sure I'm going to upset some people as the more this list of 86 goes on. So I'm just going to move on, folks. Let's check out another honorable mention here. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. And I got to tell you, making every film in the honorable mentions for this year an honorable mention hurts me. Because not only do I really like The Fly, I love the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. I love this movie. In a lot of ways, it's on par with the first one for me. Granted, it's more comedy involved in this one, no doubt. It's way less horrific and more comedic. But I absolutely love this one. I love the character of Stretch. She definitely aided in a very young Bran, and the less said about that, the better. I just love this movie overall. It really hurt to put it into an honorable mention. But for me, if you're going to watch any Texas Chainsaw Massacre sequel, this is it. It's a good time, funny, horrific, just checks all the boxes. It's a good time. Unfortunately, had to put this one as an honorable mention as well. So let's get ready for more people to be mad at me because this next film is the last honorable mention. It's Aliens. And holy shit, I feel the heat right now of people not liking me a whole lot. Now, once again, pains me to put this as an honorable mention and not as the best film of 1986. Because I really love this movie. I love Alien and I love Aliens. I even like Alien 3. Hey, you know what? Alien Resurrection isn't even that bad. All right, I'll say it. But yeah, I love this movie. It's one of my favorite all-time sequels. Another reason it pained me to put it where I did. But you know what? The less said, the better. Let's go ahead and rip this Band-Aid off so everyone can be mad at me over what topped The Fly, Texas Chainsaw 2, and Aliens. Here's my pick, ladies and gents. Horror film of 1986. And I know, I know there's a lot of people out there saying, Bran, you think Jason Lives is better than Aliens or The Fly? Yes. And I don't do this a lot, but Jason Lives. I said earlier that Friday 3 was almost like the prototypical Friday film. I say almost because Jason Lives is the Friday film, in my opinion. From everything you hear in pop culture, or especially back then about these films, this is what you heard about. If you want to watch just one Friday the 13th film and be done with them and try to soak in as much as you can about that franchise from one film, for my money, it's Jason Lives. This movie took everything that was good about the first 4 or 5 films and put it into one for us all to enjoy. It's brutal. It's got funny moments. It really pushes forward the Jason story, especially with the Tommy character, which was really cool for me because up until Tommy, there was really no protagonist that stood against Jason through more than one film. So it's for me, it's the perfect Friday film. It's probably the best Friday film in my opinion. And unfortunately, for a lot of you out there who may be angry at me, it's my pick for best horror film of 1986. as we move on to my year of birth, 1987. And here is an honorable mention, ladies and gents. And I'm pretty sure people are probably going to be upset just they were with Aliens. And I'm putting Predator here. You know, some people actually contend this isn't a horror film. And I will say it's like a horror action type thing. As you can see, Schwarzenegger stars. But I love it. It's a very heavily memed movie. I love the look of the Predator in this film. And I just love how the Predator is put over as just such a damn near unstoppable killing machine. Fantastic movie. If you're an action fan that's looking for something to watch around Halloween, hey, this is for you. Trust me. Like I said, I definitely consider this a horror action film. But yeah, definitely had to put it in my honorable mention for the year of birth, 1987. As we move on to Evil Dead 2. And this is another one of my favorites, ladies and gents. I got to tell you, you know, if you like whenever things start picking up that comical approach in the Evil Dead franchise, this is where you need to start. And a lot of people like Evil Dead 2 way better than the original even. I think it's the people that kind of appreciate that comedic element from Bruce Campbell, because let's be honest, as much as he's known for being a star of horror films, the guy's really good at slapstick humor. So this was a fantastic film. Maybe the best in the entire franchise. I don't know. It's hard to call, but it may be. Like I said with Jason Lives, if you want to watch one Evil Dead film, maybe this is the way to go this Halloween season. So moving on here, and maybe you might think, hey, is this Brand's pick for 1987? Nope, another honorable mention. Sorry to do it to you, folks. I love Dream Warriors. Once again, probably the best sequel out of the entire Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. I feel like it may be the most complete sequel in a lot of ways. But unfortunately, it's got to be another honorable mention. I feel like I'm repeating myself a little bit, but I'll say with this one the same way I said with Evil Dead 2 and Jason Lives. If you want to watch just one Nightmare film, Part 3, The Dream Warriors, may be the way to go. I feel like it's the most complete. It kind of gives you an idea for what the story is about. And overall, just one of the best entries in the franchise. So what is my pick for the best horror film in my year of birth, 1987? Well, that one's got to go to Hellraiser, a Clive Barker adaptation. Absolutely fantastic film. I mentioned earlier about how The Fly may be one of the best body horror films out there. You got to put Hellraiser A1 if that's the case. Frank's regeneration as a human being in this film is disgusting in the best way. Absolutely love it. Love all the design of the Cenobites in this film with, you know, Chatterer and Pinhead and the whole bunch. Done very well. There's a giant dick that chases someone at one part in this movie. You're not going to find that anywhere else. Come on. Let's be real here. So I say, for my money, in the year of my birth in 1987, Hellraiser is the best horror film that came out that year. And if you haven't seen it, check it out. I know this film franchise got bogged down with a lot of sequels that were really subpar. And that's not just my opinion. That's the opinion of a lot of people that I've talked to. But definitely check out the first one. And maybe in the second one. Maybe we'll get to that a little later. Who knows? But yeah, that's my pick. 1987 horror film of the year. As we move on to 1988, and here we have The Serpent and the Rainbow. This is a Wes Craven film. Gets into a lot of the voodoo, buried alive, these type of things. You have a fear of any of those type of things, this movie will probably send you into an early grave. Hopefully you're dead though, if that's the case. Not that I'm wishing anyone die, but I think I'd rather you die first before you be buried. Kind of seems a little uncomfortable and inconvenient to be buried alive. And this a lot of what this movie is about. For me, I don't really consider myself too much of a claustrophobic person. I mean, maybe under the right circumstances. But this movie is really one that can really hammer home the horror of being buried alive. So yeah, once again, it's Wes Craven. Can't miss with that. Definitely deserves to be an honorable mention for 1988. As we move on to another honorable mention for 1988, that being Halloween 4, The Revenge of Michael, or excuse me, The Return of Michael Myers. Ugh, definitely not The Revenge. We don't want to put that on any list of things that have quality and merit. Um, so yeah, Halloween 4 going back to its basics with this one, bringing back the character of Michael Myers, kind of going in with what worked in the first film. I thought, this one was done fantastically. Definitely one of the better sequels, in my opinion, of this entire franchise. Not so sure I can give this one that stamp of approval. Like, if you want to know what the Halloween franchise is about, this is the one to watch. I don't know if I can quite give you that with this one, but I will say it's definitely one of the better entries in the franchise. And way better than that piece of shit that they followed it up with. So it definitely deserves an honorable mention for 1988. And look at that, ladies and gentlemen. Look at that. I said we were going to be talking about Hellraiser 2 here momentarily, didn't I? And there it is. Another honorable mention for the year of 1988, Hellbound, Hellraiser 2. For me, the first two are really the only ones in the franchise that are amazingly well done. Now, there are some decent sequels afterwards, and there are some really bad ones afterwards. And it's a little difficult to navigate through that. But I will say, if you watch the first two, I think you're going to be very happy, very satisfied with the Hellraiser films. 3 and onward are hit or miss. But these two, I don't think they miss at all. And fantastic. In my opinion, definitely one of the better sequels in the slasher or horror genre as well. I thought it definitely deserved to have an honorable mention. As we move on to my favorite film of 1988 in the horror genre, we're talking about Chucky's very first go at it, Child's Play. Now, for those of you who watch this channel, you'll know Child's Play is one of my favorite franchises, along with Halloween and Scream and Blair Witch and things of that nature. Saw even. Love the Child's Play series. And whereas I may maintain that the sequel to this film may have been a smidge better, I don't think there's a better film in 1988 other than Don Mancini's Child's Play. Fantastic film. Absolutely love it. And you know what? It's one of those movies that I feel like a lot of people do revisit around Halloween time, and rightfully so. Like I said, in my opinion, best horror film of 1988. So we are now moving into the final year of our decade we've began here with, of the 1980s. Let's jump into some honorable mentions for the last year. So up first here, an honorable mention for 1989. I got to go with The Puppet Master. This is another one that the entire series has been cheap, campy, corny, whatever you want to call it. I acknowledge that. I respect that. The first one, I think, is very well done. I think there are some really good sequels along the way here, too. But if we're just talking about this one from 1989, maybe it's the best one. I don't know. I think there are some pieces along the way in this franchise that definitely stick out in my mind. But this is a really good, cheap little slasher film that I've always enjoyed. Probably one of, if not my favorite, full moon features. Let's say that. So you kind of know what you're getting into with full moon features, but at the same time, I think it's on the upper echelon of these films that Charles Band has put out. So yeah, moving along here in 1989, I know you people are going to hate me for this one. No, it's not the movie of the year, in my opinion. It's not. However, 1989 wasn't really that strong of a year for horror. And looking at what I considered the best horror films of that year, unfortunately, and yeah, I mean that because I don't think this is a really great movie or anything. It's kind of nostalgic for me. And I really, like the look of Jason and, there's some things like that. But this is not a good movie. I'm not even going to pretend like it is. It's Friday the 13th, Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. There are some really cool moments in this thing. I mean, there's a dude getting his head punched clean off of his shoulders. There's being bludgeoned to death by a guitar. Jason's look is really good in this movie, and the scenes that are actually filmed in New York are amazing. Just seeing Jason right in the middle of Times Square, things of that nature, it's really pretty damn cool. It's not a good movie, but I think it's a good time. So that's another honorable mention for 1989 as we move into my pick for the best horror film of 1989. I got to say, the 80s are pretty Stephen King adaptation heavy for me. Definitely with John Carpenter and Wes Craven sprinkled in as well. But this is Pet Sematary. It really is a horrifying film between all the different things that are going on in this movie, from the deformed sister in this film, to the Gage, the son in this film, to just, there's a lot of things going on in this movie. There's a good backstory laid, some good groundwork laid. I think there's some good effects in this one. I think it's really creepy on a lot of levels that work really well. So if you haven't, for some reason or another, checked out Pet Sematary, and this is the original, mind you, from 1989, the original Stephen King adaptation, I would say this is one to definitely make sure you don't skip past this Halloween season. So there it is, folks. There it is. It's only taken me 40 fucking minutes to go through this list. Holy hell. Hopefully I can whittle this down a little bit. I'm sure that'll reflect in the final edit. But that's it, folks. That's my list of the best horror of the 1980s, year by year, with honorable mentions. So yeah, it's now up to you, ladies and gents. It's spooky season. It's Halloween time. Take this list. Go check out the ones you think look interesting. And yeah, I hope everyone has a fantastic Halloween time. Bear in mind, this is just the 80s. We're going to be doing the 90s. We're going to be doing the 2000s as well. And maybe even going back, doing the 1970s, maybe even doing the 2010s. I don't know. But for the time now, I'm definitely going to be doing this for the 90s and 2000s. We'll see how it goes. If you all like it, we'll keep going. So yeah, let me know down in the comment section what you thought about this video. If you liked it, this is for you, maybe not. Let me know your thoughts on my picks, and let me know your picks for the best movies of the 1980s. So with that said, I'm Bran from Bloody Breakdown, wishing you all a very, very spooky season. We'll catch you all next time.